carbon emissions. The G20 roadmap toward a common framework for measuring digital economy is a very important. Digital economy is very important, especially for the youth. The G20 youth roadmap, we're so proud that that has been addressed, and I invite you to read it because it is addressed to you, the young people, our future. G20 initiative to reduce land aggregation and habitat loss. 1/3 of the world trees have been destroyed over the last 1 century. We need to protect our lands. We need to have a program of replantation. That's a natural sink for carbon. Also, coral reef preservation is another natural sink and very important for our nature and for our oceans. Riyadh initiative for the future of the WTO. Trade is very important, and there's a lot of trade tension taking place. We need to make those trade channels come back and free flow of all goods cross borders. Saudi Arabia launched a very strong initiative to reform the WTO that has been endorsed by the ministers of trade. The G20 action plan set the principles guiding our response to and commitment. The debt service relief that I mentioned earlier. Now we are in the final stages of preparing for our Leaders Summit. We believe that the leaders will be able to deliver a unified message to the rest of the world that reflects rising to the challenge together, building a resilient, long-lasting recovery, ensuring an inclusive recovery that tackles inequalities, putting sustainability at the heart of recovery, all of the above underpinning by empowering people, safeguarding the planet, and shaping a new frontier and a new future for our young people. Thank you very much for inviting me to share those few words with you. And I wish you the very good luck in concluding your very successful summit. Thank you, Uthman. Thank you, everyone.
And thank you to you, Your Excellency, Dr. Fahad Al-Mubarak. Very interesting to hear about Saudi Arabia's G20 agenda. We do know that coming together after COVID-19 will be absolutely critical, and amazing to hear about the cooperation in the money injected by the G20 countries towards developing a vaccine, reducing debt relief, and also keeping the flow of biomedical supplies and agricultural going. So from Saudi Arabia, we now go to the headquarters of the United Nations in New York City, where UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has sent this special missive to the Y20.
It is a pleasure to greet the Y20 Summit and to welcome youth delegates from across the G20 countries. Today, the world is facing multiple challenges. The climate crisis is escalating rapidly, leading to extreme weather, food insecurity, and population displacements. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused global suffering, upended economies, and disrupted education. And the pandemic has also exposed systemic injustices. Young people are among the most affected. As the world strives to recover better, young people have a central role to play. Already, you are at the front lines of movements for sustainable development, climate action, gender equality, and racial justice. The decisions we make during this decade of action for the Sustainable Development Goals will be critical to the future of people and planet. We cannot go back to a pre-pandemic world of poverty, inequality, and conflict. We must rebuild sustainably by raising ambition on climate mitigation, adaptation, and finance, and achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. The United Nations is strongly committed to standing with you and building equal partnerships with young people. We are here to listen, learn, and support you every step of the way in shaping a better future for all. Thank you.
What would you say if I told you that 2 out of 3 young people feel that government does not hear their voices? We will be discussing this topic with Y20 delegates, and that with the sole purpose of inspiring you.
Think that youth are not experienced enough.
Don't underestimate youth.
Don't impose ideas.
Ithra, one of the co-organizers of the Y20 2020 Summit, has produced 7 talk shows just for you. Do make sure you check them out. Great content, fun and inspiring interviews with young people. So, 10 years ago, the G20 created the Youth Engagement Group, and the communique that the Y20 produces helps to drive change for the future of people and the planet, as you heard from the Secretary General. We're now going to fast forward 10 years to 2030 to see how youth empowerment can evolve. This panel is going to look at how we can accelerate youth empowerment and what the barriers are to inclusivity. To introduce his guests, I'm delighted to bring back onto the screen the Y20 chair, Othman Almoammar.
Thank you, Edie, again. I have a feeling that I'll be doing that a lot today. I'm joined today by 2 amazing speakers who are behind the magic that is Y20 2020 this year. To recap, we have done 3 white papers, we've done 7 talk shows, we've done the Global Dialogue Fellowship, we've done the Y20 training program, and all of that was possible through the support of Misk and Ithra. Please help me welcome Director of Ithra, Hussein Hanabadaba, and Dr. Badr al-Badr, CEO of Misk Foundation. Welcome, both of you. And thank you so much first for your support for the Y20. I would like to start, because I know our time is short, by asking Hussein a question around what is Ithra?
Well, good afternoon, Uthman, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for hosting us, Ithra and Misk, to co-lead the 10th anniversary of the Y20. It's indeed a thrill to be here. And Ithra, King Abdulaziz Center for World Culture, is a Saudi Aramco citizenship initiative. We're located in Dhahran, in the eastern province of the kingdom, just a stone throw away from Prosperity Well number 7. It's the first kingdom commercial oil well that actually represent a symbol for our progress. A decade ago, a question was made, what would be our next prosperity? What would be our next investment? And the answer was the kingdom's people and youth. And hence, Ithra was born. Ithra in Arabic means enrich, where we inspire the heart and enrich the mind. And we do that by focusing on 5 key pillars: culture, community, knowledge, creativity, and arts. Ithra and the building is very iconic, and I invite everyone to explore it. But what we have inside Ithra is where we add a great value to the people and the youth. We have multi-dimensional component inside the building. Let me start by the cinema, the theater. We have a children's museum, first kind of its type in the MENA region. We have a knowledge tower, a prototype idea lab. We have a library where I'm sitting right now. Also, we have 4 galleries and museum and an energy exhibition. Ithra is not only a place to visit, but a destination that makes different. We unleash the creativity, we empower the community with knowledge, and we create a long life learning experience for the people and the youth. And I'm very thrilled to highlight that since we opened our doors back in late 2018 and up to date, we had more than 1.6 million visitors to the center, half of which are youth. And when we open our virtual windows of digital platform during the COVID-19, we have even more than 10 millions who viewed our content and engaged with our programs, not only from the kingdom, but across the globe. So this is Ithra, and this is what we do.
Absolutely amazing. Regarding the building, I highly encourage everyone just to Google Ithra. You'll be amazed. and not just by the building, but also by the amazing programs, which we'll get to in a bit. Dr. Badr, to you, I would really love to hear, what is Misk?
First of all, I just wanted to mention how proud we are to be co-chairing and co-organizing this very important activity and event. We have started this journey last year when we participated with the Saudi delegates in the Y20 in Tokyo by prepping the delegates, helping them, and taking the learnings from last year to this year. I'm very proud to be with you today as well, and excited to kick off, to be a part of the kickoff of this very important event, as we heard from Mr. General Secretary of the United Nations. This is a very important component. The youth are the cornerstone of our future. Misk here was created sector of our society, created by His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman about 10 years ago. It focuses on engaging, empowering, and enabling future leaders, whether entrepreneurs, scientists, or just government leaders. We discover the talents and unlock the potential of youth today, making them the leaders of tomorrow. Just to give you an idea about our scale and size, in 2019 alone, we empowered around 1 million youth, most of them in Saudi Arabia, but many worldwide, through 94 different programs and 3,700 programs. The types of programs that we do include fellowships, college prep courses, art exhibitions, and youth exhibitions. This is just a very short glimpse of what we do in Misk. During the pandemic, we have converted most of our programs online. And perhaps we'll get a chance to talk more about what we've done during COVID-19 and how I adapted our programs to that.
Thank you, Dr. And speaking about youth empowerment, we'd really love to get both of your perspectives on the different programs and through your mandates as both organizations that focus on youth. Hussein, perhaps you can start off by giving us a glimpse into what Ithra has done in that regard.
Sure, and Uthman, it's very important to note that half of the population in the kingdom is actually from the youth. And globally, 4 in 10 are also youth. So it's very important to empower the youth sector of the population, not only for today, but also for the future. Now, the question is, what does it mean to empower the youth? At Ithra, it actually comes down to look at the systems that enable and ensure a modern yet sustainable quality of life for the youth. This is through different platforms and programs that we do here at Ithra across the year. Those platforms are keen on knowledge sharing, future professions, and definitely voice sharing. Earlier, I highlighted the component that we have at Ithra, and each contribute to this mission and to empowering the youth. So allow me to give you some of a few examples that what we do here at Ithra and highlight national and international initiative that we do. Starting with the Knowledge Tower, and even before Ithra building was inaugurated back in 2016, we launched our Knowledge Incubator program. This program went to 40 cities. We reach out to more than 100,000 students and teachers focusing onto STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math. By doing so, we actually created an educational platform, and we focus on the future jobs that the youth needs. And this is aligned as well with our Vision 2030, where our mandate is to create 50% of the GDP to be non-oil, and you create that by those education platform and future job. Another program is our iRead, which is a national iRead competition that we do here in our library. So our library is a platform to share the knowledge, and we care about literacy, and we care about the content and the Arabic content in our library. So this program actually takes students and some professionals into a camp and teach them the basics of writing a book, presenting a book. Some of those actually who graduated from the program are actually a book writer right now. Another program which we are proudly of, it's our creative season, Tanween, where we're planning to have the Eastern Province, the capital of creativity in the kingdom. As a matter of fact, 2 weeks from today, we're going to launch our third season of Tanween under the theme, The New Next, which focus on different fields that actually create jobs, opportunity for the future. And those fields are non-industrial, focusing into fashion design, food design, marketing and branding, creating digital content, and other fields as well that are needed for the future job. From previous Tanween that we had, we created platforms that allow to engage our youth with experts, and some of those are actually pursued career following our Tanween challenge. And last but not least of those examples, the most important thing that we are truly proud of Ithra here is the volunteering program. More than 3,500 young volunteers we have. The youngest is actually 10 years old, and they contributed to more than 250,000 hours of volunteering. What we do, they don't only register to volunteer at work at Ithra during the events or our working hour. We take them through structural program. We equip them with soft skills, with technical skills that actually allow them to be able and be ready for the markets. Those only a glimpse of the programs that we do over here at Ithra. And during the pandemic, and similar to what Misk have done, we created virtual platform that engage millions and empower them with tools that will allow them to be ready for the future market.
Thank you so much. And Hadil, who is leading the Global Citizenship Task Force and is part of the Y20 team, has been quite a big contributor to the volunteer program. And she's told me quite a bit about it. I would encourage people to go and check it out. When it comes to Misk Foundation, I may be a bit biased in the sense that I know a lot of information there, but I will not take away from the talking points here for Dr. Badr. I know that we're focusing on a lot of programs that we engage with youth. Could you please give us a bit of an introduction on that?
Yes, thank you, Uthman. Our initiatives are always by youth, for youth. Many of our program managers are younger than 30, as we could see with Uthman here, one of our managers that we're very proud of. We empower them first before we ask them to empower other Misk beneficiaries. We tackle most of the challenges that face the youth, first of all, through research. So we start ground up, we understand what the issue is, what's the best way to address it, and then we design programs, initiatives around solving these problems, involving the youth in solving these problems for other youth. As a timely example, we are starting our Misk Global Forum, the 5th edition of the MGF, next week. This is a forum that this year has migrated to be a virtual forum that involves more than 5,000 people, that addresses making the youth more future ready. Coinciding with it, we're also doing our 2nd annual Entrepreneurship World Cup, this year bringing 200 startups from around the world to compete in multiple sectors to, at the end, come up with the top project. Yet, it's not only about the top project, but all the applicants that are the 200 will be receiving mentorship, coaching, and benefits to help them in an entrepreneurship journey. They will, at the end, lead to be examples and models for other entrepreneurs around the world.
Thank you both for being here. I know we're quite short on time. I would like to leave some time first for some closing remarks, and then I would like to close with a thank you. Please, Hussein.
All right, well, to close is, I would like to just, in 1 minute, the journey of the Y20 when it begins. It was, we started with very ambitious goals, programs. I remember with you, Uthman, putting to travel across the kingdom and do multiple workshops and engagement with the communique and the papers that actually address the challenges of the youth. Yet, despite the COVID-19, we learned a lot. We opened the virtual. We created a community where we reached to 7.5 million actually, with more ideas from the young generation across the globe and beyond the G20 as well. Challenges were there, challenges were addressed. And we need to focus on the solution. We need to focus on creating the platform. And the most important thing is to engage with the young generation. What we are doing today, either here at Ithra or at the Kingdom or across the globe, is not solving the issue for today, but solving the issue for the future. I have a 7-year-old daughter, Tulin, and her future is a passion for me. And what we are doing here at Ithra is creating the quality of life, yet sustainable. And this is what we all need to work together, be it here at the Y20 this year or next year. The journey shall continue and the engagement shall be there. We need to be resilient and we need to be flexible and agile. So thank you so much for hosting us today, Uthman. It's truly a thrill for Ithra and Misk to co-lead the Y20 and the 2 policies that went and the communique. It was a beautiful journey despite the COVID-19 and the pandemic.
Thank you so much.
Uthman, from my side, I'm looking forward toward a fruitful dialogue and output for the G20 Youth Engagement Group. I'd just like to end with thanking all the youth delegates who participated from the get-go of this initiative. And I'd like to special thanks that I'd like to direct toward the organizers, the Misk and the Ithra co-organizers for putting this together.
Thank you, Dr. Badr. Thank you, Hussein, so much for all of your contribution. And honestly, thank you for the amazing Y20, despite the difficulties and the circumstances. I will not name each individual that was part of the amazing team from the Y20 who came from Misk and Ithra, but without them, honestly, this would not have happened. I am, in many cases, a footnote in the work that they are doing, regardless of in content, in communications, in overall logistics, in this amazing event. And thank you again for your support. And I close the session by also thanking the amazing team that was a part of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much there, Othman Al-Muammar and his panel. Fascinating to hear how Ithra and Misk are in fact walking the talk and implementing not only the Saudi Vision 2030, but also the very key elements of the Sustainable Development Goals, at which youth is the heart of. Now, we heard there how COVID-19 has increased the need for dialogue and action between the governments and youth. Why? Well, one example, the pandemic has created the largest disruption in education systems in history, affecting at one point 1.6 billion students. And we know that girls and young women are disproportionately affected. We also know that while young people are less likely to lose their life to coronavirus, they have more chance of losing their jobs to the economic effects. So let's look now at just how young the world is. So this next panel will look at how we can create the right framework to bring youth and policymakers together. Here to take you through this next session is one of my favorite people to share a stage with, whether it's digital or real, the Y20 Sherpa from Saudi Arabia. Please welcome Sarah Al-Kaheri.
Thank you so much, Edie. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Al-Kaheri, and I'm the Y20 Sherpa. I would love to welcome you all in this session. As you can all tell, this has been a year that has never been like anything we've ever experienced before. As the COVID-19 pandemic hit, it changed almost every aspect of our lives. We had to adapt how we work, how we studied, and how we connected as a community. And at the forefront of all this change were young people. They were resilient and undeterred. They came together and collaborated to create innovative solutions that both serve and support their communities, their governments, and each other. As we continue to battle this global crisis, it has become clear that the relationship between governments and young people is important to enable young people to continue developing their innovative ideas. In this session, we will explore how governments from around the world have created frameworks and networks to leverage young people's energies and their innovative ideas. Please join me in welcoming to our virtual stage our speakers for this panel: Senator Matteo Renzi, former Prime Minister of Italy.
Good afternoon, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone.
Honorable Minister Shri Kiren Rijiju, Minister of Youth Affairs and Sports, India. His Excellency, Minister Alvin Tan, Minister of State for the Ministry of Culture, Community and Youth, and Ministry of Trade, Singapore.
Everyone, thank you for having us.
And Dr. Flavio Siniscalce, the head of the Department for Youth Policies and Universal Civic Engagement of the Presidency of the Council of Ministers, Italy.
Hello, good afternoon.
Welcome. Dr. Siniscalce, I'd love to direct my first question to you. In Italy, how has the government communicated with young people to support them in becoming empowered and active citizens?
Thank you, Chair, dear ministers, dear Senator Renzi. I'm very honored to participate to this important conference representing Italy and Minister Vincenzo Spadafora, and to greet you all on his behalf. I would like to talk about our measures on youth policies. Italian youth policies are inspired by the European Youth Strategy, which puts youth participation at the center of its objectives. According to the strategy, we must engage our youth in democratic life, allowing them to participate in the development of the policies that affect their lives. We must connect our youth, offering them opportunities for cultural and civic actions through solidarity and volunteer activities, such as, for example, our Universal Civic Service. We must empower our youth, supporting them in taking charge on their own lives. How do we do that? First of all, since 2018, we supported the creation of a strong National Youth Council, which is an independent umbrella organization representing Italian youth vis-à-vis the government. At present, there is no formal obligation in the side of the government to request the view of the Council when adopting laws that have an impact on youth. That's why we are discussing a framework law that will support a participatory approach in the formulation of youth policies. The law, we also finally recognize youth workers, who are a bridge to reach out to all our youth, even those with fewer opportunities, and for their empowerment. Moreover, the Erasmus Plus Youth Agency is our ally in implementing the European Youth Dialogue. It's a consultation process aimed to promoting youth participation in the formulation of public policies. The dialogue is developed through surveys and meetings among young people, youth organizations, politicians, and decision makers, as well as experts and researchers. Last but not least, the dialogue aims at reaching out to youth who are not yet engaged in youth organization and have fewer opportunities. This is why, for instance, last year we made an agreement with our Ministry of Justice to include young offenders into our consultation. In addition to promote youth inclusion and participation, we are developing a platform that will include in a single website all existing training, employment, and cultural opportunities that are offered to young people between 14 and 35 years old. The platform will support the dialogue between the youth community and public institutions. We are also developing a youth card connected with the European Youth Card that will improve access and offer discounts on mobility, recreational and cultural activities, purchase of goods, etc. All these measures are aimed at increasing youth participation and their rights. Thank you.
That's quite amazing to hear, especially what you said about the recognition of youth workers. I know that the EU, for example, has called for a ban on unpaid internships, which I think will lead the way in making sure that young people, especially now as the economy is changing and the gig economy is becoming quite prominent, their rights are protected. And I think that what you said about youth dialogue is quite important. And so I would love to ask you, Minister Tan, what are some examples of constructive and inclusive dialogue with young people across societal divides?
Thank you, Sarah, and a good evening from Singapore. I really wanted to just frame it in three areas. I thought it would be helpful to help to frame the conversation. And so, well, Singapore is a really small country. We're about 5.7 million. We're relatively young as well, 55 years of independence, since our independence. And I wanted to frame it into three things. The first is how we engage youth on the critical matter of life. And life is important because obviously now we are facing the COVID-19 crisis. And I just wanted to really talk about how our youth have been really helpful in helping us to manage the crisis. So in the early days, we faced a lot of challenges with the crisis because it was very unknown. In the last couple of days, we've had very low digits, single, even zero cases in 2 days ago, and a low fatality rate of 0.05%. Global numbers about 3%. And I think the youth are playing a really important part in securing lives. And we're having that conversation with them at this critical juncture because they're helping us, wearing masks, making sure that social distancing and helping to get the message out. And that's critical in a crisis. The second thing is livelihood. And livelihood means jobs and economic opportunities. And I think our youth are worried because of the impact of COVID-19. But they have been really active in looking for ways in which to look for job opportunities. And the government knows that this matters to them. And so we're helping them to get, for example, internships. We're paying, partnering with private sector companies and government on this SG traineeship program so that they get, fresh graduates coming out and they get paid internship in these organizations. So that's a livelihood. We're also upskilling them in what we call a skills future movement in Singapore. And the dialogue revolves around that as well, jobs, livelihood, and economic opportunities. And the last bucket, Sarah, is with regards to dialogue about the issues around life. And the issues around life that matter to our youth, including mental well-being, which is even more acute now because of COVID-19, issues around environment, which there are opportunities for more green economy initiatives, but then also they're interested in gender equality and also fairness and criminal justice rehabilitation. So just these three buckets: securing life, securing livelihoods, and also the issues around life that are important to our youth.
This is quite amazing. So securing life, securing livelihood, and having constructive dialogue with young people. And I think you touched upon mental well-being as being something that is quite critical, especially given the current pandemic. And it's becoming an issue that has been quite prominent, but is now on the rise even more. And so I would love to ask you, Minister Kiran Rijiju, what are some of the post-COVID-19 mechanisms that will be put in place to support young people as we hopefully overcome this global crisis?
Well, good evening. I'm very happy, first of all, to join the panel. And on behalf of my ministry and the youth of India, I would like to extend my greetings to all of you, Sarah and panel members, excellencies. First of all, now we have come into a phase where we need to really rejuvenate ourselves because we have already faced lots of difficulties in last 5-6 months. Now you rightly pointed out what we intend to do to overcome the challenges. Of course, the challenges are huge and the extent of damages the COVID-19 has caused to the people are enormous. And this is right at this moment, we feel that we need to galvanize the youth of the country. And as a young nation, India's large population are below the age of 35. So we have to take the youth on board on whatever we embark upon to do. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi has given a very clarion call to the youth of the country to come forward and face this challenge. And there are a series of steps being taken. There's a huge economic package being announced. For that, we are taking it forward to create self-reliance amongst the people. And secondly, we are also mobilizing large numbers of volunteers. Right now, we have more than 6 million volunteers under my ministry. So I have already made my mind very clear that we have to increase the numbers. So maybe in next few months' time, we should be able to register more than 10 million youth volunteers under my ministry. My Prime Minister also desires that large numbers of youths must be brought into this volunteerism. So we are on one side tackling this COVID-19 challenge with all our effort to create awareness, to make people aware of their responsibilities, all kind of necessary steps, because health and safety is something, there are certain protocols. So we need to create awareness amongst the people, whether in the cities or in the countryside. We need to go deeper. For that, we need to mobilize the young forces of our country. Unfortunately, in India, we have a very organized form of youth organizations, whether in the central government or with the state government. So we are mobilizing that. If all the organized youths of country come together, I think we can face any challenge. And today, in this Y20 forum, I would like to also share that whatever India is doing, we are seeing some success. And I would also look forward to learn from my colleagues from other countries, how youths are being mobilized, how, in what manner youths are working in the forefront. So some of the points I just heard from my colleague from Singapore. And of course, I would be happy to hear from others. And His Excellency Matteo Renzo, the former Prime Minister of Italy. Last time when I was in my previous term, I was the minister in charge for disaster management. That time I was about to go to Italy to attend a meeting at Florence for disaster management. So our former Prime Minister, I'm sorry that I could not come that time. It was cancelled at the last moment, but I sent a video message to you. I hope you remember, but I'm hopeful that someday I will come to Florence. But why I'm mentioning this point is we are doing lots of programs for training in terms of disaster management so that our youth can handle any kind of challenges, any kind of calamities or difficulties. So we are taking multi-pronged strategies to handle this situation. As you all very well know about India's large population, if we don't gear up at right time, we will face unmanageable crisis. So our youth population right now is more than 800 million. So we know very well that if we don't conduct ourselves meticulously, properly, then the magnitude of problem can become huge. So I'm lucky that our Prime Minister Narendra Modi had called a lockdown on 24th March, in the very beginning of this pandemic. So I think because of that, we could handle many more things which would have come otherwise if we had not called the lockdown at that point of time. But at the same time, I'm also following lots of success story and lots of things the youth organizations are doing in other countries. And today in this Y20 platform, I would also be very happy to learn the experiences of our friends from other countries. And I would be very happy to share India's experience with my friends. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister, for giving us the invitation to learn from India's experience, especially with 800 million young people. I'm sure we have a lot to learn. And I think that this makes it clear how important the dialogue is between countries and the young people of those countries in learning from each other and each other's experiences. And I think over the past few months, this was quite clear in the experience that the Y20 delegates went through in researching and developing policies and recommendations that reflect and support young people from the G20 countries. And as important as this dialogue is, sometimes there are barriers. And I would love to ask you, Senator Renze, what are some of the barriers that you have seen from your experience as former mayor of Florence and as former prime minister of Italy in starting this dialogue and making sure that it is maintained with young people?
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you so much to other very, very interesting friends and colleagues. I believe your question is a great question because really, pandemic created a terrible disaster around the world in terms of human life, first of all, in terms of crisis for economy, jobs, and everyone knows very well how big, how terrible was and is the consequences of pandemic. But there is a consequence about young people, about youth. Nobody speaks about it. And congratulations to Saudi presidency for G20 to choose this point as one of the most important, because really that is one of the most interesting and dramatic point to discuss. What is the situation and what is the possible solution? First of all, the first decision from a lot of government was 6 months ago, close the school. Okay, this is normal. I understand the reason, and I know maybe in that time there is not alternative. But if you think about it, young people was the part of population who received the terrible effects of closing the schools, because the decision to close the decision of closing was the decision who changed the life, first of all in terms of human relation, in terms of dreams, in terms of possibility to exchange, to share some experience. So the young people was the first part of population who received damage, not in terms of risk of life, but in terms of risk for social life, for relation. And of course, a government today have a choice very hard, because every government have to decide between decision to close, lockdown, local lockdown, global lockdown, school lockdown, and at the same time, the idea is try to offer to young people the possibility to stay together, and that it's impossible in that time. So what is the solution for me? First of all, involve the people, as all the friends told, Flavio, Alvin, His Excellency the Minister, Kieran, and a special welcome to Florence also for the future. But everyone explained the position of the government. The first idea is involve the young people to construction of new world, because that have to be the message. Okay, this is a terrible pandemic, this is a problem, but you, young people, will be the protagonists of their reconstruction. Exactly as after a war, we need people who ideals, dreams, energy. And for that reason, okay, young people was the first to close with the school, but will be the first, will create a new world. For that, it's important not only involved in terms of communication with the social, with the new technologies, but also involved with an emotion. And that is the final point. For me, the most important thing today is try to give a vision and horizon for the next years, the next decade. And in that horizon, in that vision, young people have to think, okay, this is my place. Because if the government closed the school, that is correct for the coronavirus. But that is a message very negative for the young people. Where is my place? My place is closed. Now, if we have a vision for the next years, for the next 10 years, for the next decade, we can give this message to the young people. Okay, now it's time of difficulty, but all together, we will build a world focused on emotion, values, ideals, innovation, new technologies, old ideals and old culture, because new technologies could be at the same time old culture, and that is the place for you. We close the school for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, but we will open to you the new world. That is the real necessity, not only a campaign, not only an initiative, not only a decree, not only a law, but an emotion together. And that is the priority for me, for the new, for the government, for the future. Come back to have a feeling with the younger people. Congress, because the decision to dedicate a part of G20 to young people, it's a very, very important decision. And I have a message for my friend, Italian and Indian. Please, also in the next years, 2021 in Italy, 2022 in India, I think a part of a legacy of a Saudi presidency have to be exactly that. Continue to invest in young people and in the direction of youth protagonism.
Thank you so much, Senator. And I echo your invitation to Italy and India to include young people in the Y20 and the G20 dialogues next year. And I also want to stress on the point you said about involving young people in the reconstruction of life after COVID and after this pandemic is hopefully resolved. As you said, it is quite important for culture and technology to come together and make sure that we don't let go of our culture and our histories, but make sure that they're adapted and they're part of the technologies that we develop. As we end this session, I would love to ask from each of you to just say a few words, a quick recommendation to the young people who are with us today. I will call out each one of you because this virtual setting makes it easier that way. Your Honorable Minister, Kiran Rijiju, what are a few words you would love to give to young people?
Oh, well, thank you very much. As a closing remark, I would call upon the youth to maintain yourself, carry yourself very well, remain fit. In India, we have launched Fit India movement, whereby we are calling everyone to remain mentally fit, physically fit, and that is how you can carry forward. So always be alert, always you strengthen yourself, you make yourself strong so that you can help others. In a way, our Fit India movement has become very successful. Young, old, man, woman, everybody is participating, and it has become a people's movement in India. So along with that, keep positive mindset, and we take all challenges into our stride. I'm very confident, and with today's meeting, we have already come a long way in handling the COVID-19, and the youths must take charge of all the affairs for the future, for the next generation. I'm very happy to be part of this discussion and look forward to meet all of you in person, in real, and have a much more better in-depth discussion in future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. If I may ask Senator Renzi, a few words.
Maybe just one message. All the world think young people have to be food for algorithms. Because we are surrounded from a new technology, new device, all technologies, to every message to bring in our soul all data, all details, all information. Okay, we became not men and women, but food for algorithms. My message, my wish for young generation is exactly that. You are not food for algorithms. You are food for intelligence. You are part of the great possibilities of the new world after COVID-19 will become. And so my message is believe in your dreams. Believe in your ideas. Don't waste the great opportunity of your youth, and at the same time, refuse this message. You became only food for big data, food for algorithms. You are absolutely more important than an algorithm.
Thank you, Senator. Minister Tan?
Thank you, Sarah. To all the youth here in Y20, I just wanted to say that, we cannot choose which moment in time to live or how the crisis has thrusted upon us, but we can choose what to do with this crisis. So in many times, we talked about the proverbial crisis of this generation, but it is also an opportunity, as Senator Randy said, an opportunity of a generation that this proverbial great reset has brought us. And so I would charge and I would say, dream, yes, as Senator Randy had mentioned, but and also act, because there is no better time right now to try new things, to act upon it, because this great reset has afforded us an opportunity of a generation. So cannot wait to see what all of our youngsters have in mind and what they're going to be acting upon and to come up with in this new COVID world.
Thank you, Minister. Dr. Siniskalche?
Thank you. I'm definitely agree with Matteo about the necessity to have to share the emotions to the young people, and for us is a great opportunity because in the 2021 for the first time in history, Italy will host the G20 Summit and another important conference, the pre-COP 26 youth event in Milan. And it will be a fantastic opportunity for the youth climate change movement, to make their voices even more heard at the international level. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Doctor, and thank you all so much for being with us today. As our speakers have said, go out and act and enjoy the rest of the summit. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you so much to our chair there, Sarah Al-Kheri, the Y20 Sherpa from Saudi Arabia. So in order not to become food for algorithms, dream, believe, and act. We heard there, use your intelligence to and dreams to turn up the volume on what should and needs to be done. Now, part of empowerment comes from within, that feeling that I deserve to be here. I belong in this seat at this table. But how do you feel empowered in the first place? And when things get tough, how do you keep going? So who better to ask than Jay Shetty, #1 New York Times bestselling author, a fellow podcaster. Jay applies what he learned from being a monk in India: gratitude, discipline, meditation, empathy, and service to help other people find their purpose. Jay, we're going to get to the serious part in just a minute, but first of all, tell me, what were the best and worst things about being a monk?
That's a great question. It's wonderful to be with all of you, and I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Let's start with the worst, shall we? Let's start with the worst. The worst things were having to make sure you had the discipline to wake up at 4 a.m. every day. That was tough. That was really, really difficult. And it got easier as time went on, for sure, as I saw the value in why we woke up. But that definitely took some time and discipline. I'd say that the best thing was almost ironically the morning meditations. They were incredible. And so the hardest thing or the worst thing was waking up at 4 a.m. And the best thing was almost waking up at 4 a.m. because those morning meditations that we had are some of the ones that I hold closest to my heart today when I'm traveling and moving and doing all these things. I often reflect on being in that place again.
So it is stressful to travel, to do all the things that you do. You've spoken about the stress that we feel that when we're rushed by other people's timelines. And I think that's a really interesting concept, but tell me more what you mean by that and what can we do about it?
So we're all surrounded by three things, and I call these in my book OEOs: opinions, expectations, and obligations. A lot of us are living our life trying to fulfill the expectations of the people around us. We're trying to live up to the opinions of people around us, or we're following dutifully the obligations that have been set before us. This may be parents, it may be teachers, it may be school, it may be extended society, it may be what we see on social media. And because of this, we are following paths that may not be our true paths. We're following pursuits that may not be our true pursuits. And what happens is we start to look at our life as either ahead of everyone or, more commonly, feeling behind everyone. And as soon as we feel ahead or behind, we stop losing perspective on what we truly have to offer, who we truly are, and we get lost in this false race that we create in our minds. And we're always trying to play catch up. We're always trying to get ahead of that one individual, not realizing that when you look at it as a race, you'll always be ahead and you'll always be behind.
So what do you do about it?
The number one thing to do about it is first realize that there is no race. There is no sprint. There is no marathon. In the book, I describe it as there are an unlimited number of seats in the theater of happiness. So we've all created this viewpoint that there's a finite number of seats for success. There's a finite number of seats for happiness, for joy, for entrepreneurship, for our purpose. And so we think if someone's sitting on that seat, that means they may have taken ours. So we compare ourselves. We may think that if we don't get there first, then someone else is going to take our seat, because in the world we live in, there's a finite number of seats to that concert. There's a finite number of seats to watch that sports game. And so we live in a finite world, and therefore we think that there are only a finite number of seats in the theater of happiness. The truth is we have to realize that that's just not the case. Someone else's success does not take away from yours. Someone else's joy or happiness has no impact on yours unless you let yourself be discouraged by it. So first we have to recognize that. The second thing we have to do is we have to allow ourselves to explore ourselves, to experiment and discover what our true passion, strengths, and compassion are. This is where purpose is found, in the heart of this synergy between passion, strengths, and compassion. We will spend our whole lives feeling misplaced, feeling disconnected, unless we discover and make an effort to discover these three paths. And when we do that, we get the confidence, we get a sense of enthusiasm and energy that we're contributing something, that we have something to offer and something to give. So the first thing we have to do is recognize that this finite world that we live in and we've created is not the infinite world that truly exists. And the second thing we have to understand is that we have to action and take a dedicated pursuit towards our purpose by discovering passion, strengths, and compassion.
Okay, so let's talk about the steps that the audience can do to find their own purpose.
So first of all, let's look at those three methods to finding purpose and the heart of purpose. Passion. Now you may say, Jay, I don't know what I'm passionate about. If you don't know what you're passionate about, a good place to start is curiosity. What is it that you always pick up a book about? What is it that you love watching documentaries about? What is it that you talk about, that you send messages to your friends all day? What is it that you're absorbed in and immersed in without even knowing? Could that be something that could become a part of your purpose? See it as a launch pad and a starting point. Now, if you're saying, Jay, I've got lots of things I'm passionate about, I don't really know which one to choose, and you're in that lucky position, then what you want to say is, well, where are my strengths? Where do my passions and my strengths overlap? Passion on its own is not good enough to find a purpose. It needs to be balanced with strengths. So where are your skills? Where are your expertise? And it's important to note, don't confuse inexperience with weakness. Edie and I were just talking about how we're both amateur tennis players, and we're both trying to learn this new skill. And well, Edie might be a lot better than me. I put her in that bracket just based on our conversation. But here's the thing, we're both enthusiastic to learn about tennis. Now, tennis is not my purpose, but as a hobby, when I'm looking at it, I still have to think about it in the same way. Am I enthusiastic about turning this into a strength and a skill? At one point in time in my life, social media was just an interest. It became a strength through diligent work. At one time, reading these ancient texts and learning them and trying to share them was just a curiosity. Today, it's something that I do every single day and has become a habit. Inexperience and weakness are not the same thing. And the third and final step is discovering your compassion. A lot of the time, a lot of us find our purpose not through our passion, but our compassion. What pain have you been through that you don't want someone else to face? What pain have you been through that you want to help someone else through? What challenge do you see in the world that you want to solve? That can often be the gateway to your purpose. But you don't figure out your purpose in here or by writing and scribbling things down. You figure it by thinking and then implementing, acting, getting involved, getting engaged, booking a course, going to a seminar, going to a cause, helping out, volunteering, supporting, interning, shadowing someone. You do it by getting active. That's where you start finding that process.
Okay, so we're running out of time, but things are tough at the moment, and you have spoken about choosing resilience as well. But tell me, what does that mean? How do I teach myself resilience?
So there's a beautiful statement that was said to me on my podcast by Ray Dalio. Ray Dalio is the author of Principles and a billionaire investor worth, I believe, $20 billion. And he counts meditation as one of his core habits. But in terms of specifically for resilience, he has this beautiful statement that he shares, which is, it's an equation actually. Pain plus reflection equals progress. Pain plus reflection equals progress. Now, if you remove reflection from that equation, all you're left with is pain. And so a lot of us, when we're going through pain, when we don't make time to reflect, we can't build resilience. Resilience is also built through reflection, through introspection, asking ourselves, what am I learning from this? How am I never going to make this mistake again? What skills and muscles do I need to develop to overcome this? And when you shift into that mode, you start gaining the insight needed to overcome the next challenge. So reflection, allow yourself in pain, not to just numb it, not to just distract yourself from it, not avoid it, but ask yourself, what am I learning? What skills am I developing? And how can I make sure I continue to develop those that will help me get across this path?
Wow, I could go on with you all day, Jay. In fact, it reminds me of a chef I once worked with who said, get used to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So yes. Teach yourself to cook something that's really hard or do an activity that is incredibly difficult. And also that there is something to be gained from those times that are incredibly tough.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So Jay Shetty, thank you so much for joining us here during Y20. I'm sorry to let you go, but we will let you get on with your day. I know it's early over there in Los Angeles. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I'm so grateful to be with you all.
So now we want to hear from you in the audience. What do you think your biggest impediment, or what do you think the biggest impediment to youth empowerment is? You'll see some options on the screen there. Click on the one that you believe best reflects your opinion, either about you or about your region, where you come from. Is it the lack of influence in policy-making decisions? So are politicians not listening to you? Is it a lack of mentorship? Or is it a lack of jobs, lack of places to get employed? Could you or people in your region be feeling a lack of support from family and friends? Or is it a question about education? Is there a lack of ability to get and build skills? Or is it none of the above? So you will be clicking on the answer you believe best reflects your opinion, and we'll be bringing those results up in just a few moments. There you go. So it looks like, in fact, it is lack of influence in policymaking decisions. So those members of the government that are out there, do listen. The youth is ready to act and serve. So the next panel is going to be looking at the state of youth leadership and how to address those mismatches that you have identified just then. How much are youth currently involved in decision-making conversations? What's keeping them out? How do we get more mentorship or sponsorship embedded to keep helping young people grow? To take us through this next session, please welcome the Y20 head delegate from my home country, the United States, Lauren Power.
Hello, and welcome to our panel session on the state of youth leadership, addressing mismatches. Please welcome our distinguished speakers. We have Jayathma Wickramanayake, Secretary General's Envoy on Youth of the United Nations, and John R. Ryan, President and CEO of the Center for Creative Leadership. My name is Lauren Power, Y20 Head Delegate of the United States, and I'm honored to be moderating this session. During our discussion, I encourage all our listeners to utilize the chat function to submit any questions you may have. We will reserve some time at the end of our panel to discuss any questions you may have. Let's get started. According to a recent survey by the Y20 and the Center for Creative Leadership, 65% of respondents think their country would benefit from more youth leadership. However, 87% of respondents gave different responses when describing the current versus ideal roles of youth in leadership. In our panel today, we hope to explore how young people and institutions can improve the state of youth leadership. How can we successfully match expectations with reality or match the demand with the offer? John, what are some incentives and disincentives for youth to engage in leadership positions?
Well, thank you, Lauren, and happy birthday. As you mentioned, the Center for Creative Leadership had the privilege of interviewing and surveying over 10,000 youth between the ages of 18 and 35. And the results were just what you said. It appears that those not in leadership position, as well as those that are in leadership positions, value the impact that leaders can have in empowering others to get really worthwhile things done. That was impressive. And they also liked the idea that it prepared them for future careers outside of what they're doing right now. The disincentives were that they said that there's too much stress, too much worry, not enough psychological safety, not relevant to their everyday lives. So those are interesting things, but I suggest that we change the narrative on leadership. It's not about being in high positions. It's not about being in command of lots of men and women. It's really more about using your influence for a worthwhile cause. And so all of us can be leaders. That's my message. We've been doing that for 50 years. And the only requirement to become a leader is to want to be one. If you want to be a leader, you will be one.
That's very inspirational. Good advice for all of us. Jayathma, would you care to add to that?
Thank you very much, Lauren. And again, happy birthday to you. Such an honor to share this virtual stage with you and John. Well, to answer your question, I think the biggest incentive that young people have towards leadership or taking action on the causes they care about is building a better world for themselves, for their communities, and for future generations. A lot of the times I feel young people don't have a choice to really compare the incentives and disincentives when it comes to taking action or taking leadership in solving the issues that they care about. For an example, the climate crisis, it is an existential crisis. We do not have a choice as a generation to sit back and wait for things to happen, because if we don't act now, the consequences are going to be bitter and we might not even have a livable planet to live with. So I would say in certain cases, the incentive really is having no choice and being pushed as young people to take those leadership positions and do something about the future of our world. Disincentives, through my work with young people around the world, a common concern that I hear is that most often the existing systems do not really represent young people's needs, their rights, and their pressing concerns. What disincentivizes young people are the systems of exclusion, are systems that makes the rich ultra rich and poor ultra poor, systems that perpetrate colonialism and discriminate you based on your skin color, systems that perpetrate sexism, patriarchy, and make young women feel like they are secondary citizens, systems that promote extensive consumption and production without really putting people and the planet first. There are also myths and misconceptions that disincentivize young people from taking leadership positions. Sometimes we hear these statements like, oh, you don't have enough experience to lead, or young people are lazy, they're always on the phone, or in some countries, young people are seen as a threat to peace and security, as a threat to government, who are always rebelling and protesting. So these harmful narratives and harmful stereotypes also disincentivize youth from engaging in action that can actually change the courses of their lives and of their communities.
Thank you for that. I think that you've highlighted several systemic problems that youth are contending with when it comes to how they can best take action. And that leads me to my next question. Jayatma, I'd like to ask you, what are the best ways to incentivize youth to engage in meaningful leadership experiences, taking into account some of these systemic challenges that you've just highlighted?
I think first we need to treat young people as partners. That's one of the biggest issues that I face, for an example, in my work at the United Nations or the development and international community. We always see young people as beneficiaries of the programs that we are conducting, but that doesn't really recognize the dignity, agency, and the leadership and their unique experience and expertise that young people bring to the table. So we first have to recognize young people as partners. Secondly, young people, there is an increasing trend that young people do not trust or believe institutions anymore, because institutions are not, they're corrupt, they're not transparent, they're not open. Oftentimes, young people do not have the information they need to engage meaningfully with those institutions. So second, I would say, is being transparent and being open about our work. Thirdly, allocating enough resources and funding. If we just engage youth for the sake of engaging without really investing in building their capacities and creating spaces where every young person can participate, then we are not creating a level playing field. A lot of the young people, and I'm sure all the Y20 delegates in this meeting today, are volunteering your time on top of your regular jobs and on top of your education to actually get engaged in a social cause. So we need to make sure that we allocate enough resources and funding and opportunities for young people to meaningfully engage with our institutions. Fourthly, I believe creating safe spaces is extremely important. In my work, I see how with so much passion and enthusiasm and ingenuity, young people come to institutions, but they often face cases of abuse of authority, sexual harassment, even in public institutions, in public spaces, in digital spaces. So creating safe spaces without harassment, abuse, bullying is also important for us to incentivize young people to participate. And lastly, we often ask young people to, become leaders, hold our leaders accountable. But when they face trouble because of their activism, we often don't show up to support them. So those networks to protect them, to support them and uphold them is also important when we talk about incentivizing youth to take action.
Those are all excellent points. I think that you've highlighted a great deal of call to action for all of us to take to heart. John, do you care to add to that?
Yes, but I'd like to thank my colleague here. She just gave a tremendous answer. Look, we've been in the business of developing leaders for 50 years. We're passionate about developing the majority of the human race, which are women. We were the first ones to actually talk about a glass ceiling back in the 1980s. And we've been trying to develop leaders, youth leaders, for many years. I could tell you a couple stories. You know, North Carolina, where I am today, has very rural areas, and a lot of the jobs have been lost. So the people who go to college don't come back to the rural areas. And what we've done with a program called the Golden Leaf Program is actually take sophomores and juniors in colleges and universities and give them some leadership development, and then fund them to go back and work as interns or as employees in their local towns. And the results have been fabulous. You know, 10% of what leaders know, they learn in a classroom. 20%, this is our research again, 20% is from working with peers and colleagues and learning from them, and 70% is doing. So this is why it's so important that leadership is a muscle. The more you use it, the better you get at it. Think about your coaches that you had in a sport or in music or whatever. The earlier you start to develop the right fundamentals, the more likely you're going to be ready for that first opportunity or that first internship. And it is a partnership, and that's when it works best. But I think sometimes the best mentoring and coaching is by peers. Peer coaching and mentoring in our research is more effective than somebody chronologically like me, chronologically advantaged, mentoring someone your age, Lauren. So peer mentoring is very valuable, but so is coaching. Even the best athletes in the world, the best musicians, they have coaches. They're working on their strengths and working on those areas that need further development. So all those things are incredibly important for youth. And I couldn't say it better. I mean, you know, we all need to roll up our sleeves and do something that we're passionate about. And that's the way you can evolve into becoming a leader. It's a steady process, and it's a journey. It's not over. The leadership journey is not over until you're no longer standing vertical. That's how important it is.
I love what you said about leadership being a muscle that you can exercise and build. And we've highlighted several different ways to express leadership and help build leadership, for all the way up from the systemic level, multinationally, at the national level, and then more at the individual level, helping to develop mentorships and relationships with community involvement. I wonder though, we've always been kind of referring back to the interaction between youth and non-youth, or youth and organizations, youth and community. Jayathma, I wonder, what are some ways that youth can advocate for youth? How can they help to create positive experiences and leadership potential for one another?
I think, Lauren, that's a really important question, and a question about solidarity, right? When we did our surveys and researches when we were compiling the youth strategy for the UN, what we found out was that every young person's lived reality is unique. It's their own unique lived experience. But the challenges that young people face does not have borders, it does not have boundaries. So globally, many young people tackle or grapple with the same issues that you and I are grappling, even though you're from the United States and I'm from Sri Lanka. So there are some common threads that really binds us all. And being digital natives and digital citizens, I think social media and digital technologies are one tool that we can really use to link up with those issues, but also with the solutions that we are bringing up around the world. I'll give you an example. Every Friday, adolescent children go into streets before the pandemic and were protesting against climate change, the Fridays for Future movement. But we know that it's not possible to protest in every country. In some countries, protesting is illegal. In some countries, if you protest, you can go to jail. So what were these activists doing? Those activists who were in countries where they had more rights and more freedom to really protest and hold their governments accountable were bringing the voices of those who couldn't. They were getting quotes from those young activists. They were lending their social media platforms for those activists and were really supporting to get their voices and their messages out, even though they lived in places that were not really safe for them to go out and protest. So this is one way in my work that I've seen how young people express solidarity when it comes to fighting for issues that they all care about. So there are so many ways, as John said, through peer mentoring and peer mobilizing and through internet and social media that young people have been advocating for each other and supporting for each other. But I think still there is so much more that we can do to actually make sure that they have access to these tools and that these tools are equally accessible by every young person, and that these places of digital or public spaces are safe for young people to participate in.
Those are excellent and inspiring examples for all of us. John, would you care to add to that?
Sure. You know, peer-to-peer counseling and mentoring is so important. I've been privileged to lead four different universities. And if you think, for those of you who have gone through a college or university, when you get your orientation, who gives it to you? It's not some old bald-headed guy like me. It's seniors and juniors in your university or college, right? And what do? They orient you to all the good things and the things that you need to watch out for and the opportunities that you'll have over the next 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years. That's peer mentoring. It's peer empowerment of others. We have the privilege of working with groups in high schools where we'll go in and we'll give them some basic education on competencies, leadership, and then we'll ask them to pick a challenge. There's a school about 40 miles away here called Ravenscroft. We've been working with all the students from 1st grade to 12th grade. Think about that. Just to give them simple principles about leadership development. And then when they're juniors and seniors, we ask them to take on a project. What do you want to change to make better in your high school? We just saw some terrific students do this report to the board, to the principal, and they're changing the culture, and it's all about enhancing equity, diversity, and inclusion in their school. Think about that. These are young men and women who are changing the culture, and that's already underway. So, you know, I think it's an organization that's not going to exist very long if they're not looking to put young men and women in positions of early leadership where they can learn and develop and be mentored by some older people, some peers, and given opportunities. But the big thing is, go back to that muscle thing. If you don't get the practice, you can't build your skill set. And you all need to build your skill set because we need you. This world needs you, this society needs you, your own country needs you to step up and be a leader. I'm excited about it. Having been in higher education for a number of years, nothing wakes me up more than thinking, God, I'm gonna learn something today from somebody that's probably 40 years, 50 years younger than me. It's exciting. And that's how most CEOs should feel.
That's a great call to action. And I love the enthusiasm that you have for being a part of leadership development for youth. You've highlighted a wonderful relationship between building systemic mechanisms for decision-making inclusion for youth, as well as a bridge between that and leadership development for young people on the individual level. Jayathma, how would you say we can ensure mentorship, knowledge sharing, and peer empowerment work in practice?
I think at the end of the day, Lauren, all of that speaks to the concept of power sharing, right? What we usually see is either it is international organizations or corporate companies or even our own political systems from municipal councils up to national legislature. What we see is that power is really concentrated in a few people. And often these few people are not really representative of the masses and the communities that are out there who are being governed by the rules and regulations and the policies that they make. We see this gap highest when it comes to political participation. Half of the world's population right now is under the age of 30, but the average age of a politician is 55 years. This gap is the highest in Africa, where the average, the median age is 19 years, and the median age of a politician is 65 years. So I think if we are to successfully come up with policies and programs that can have a long-term sustainable impact in our communities, we need to make sure that those decisions are intergenerational. So generations need to learn to share power with each other. This means that we encourage more young people to run for office. This means that we encourage youth leadership from a very early age, as John said. This means we are removing legal barriers that are there for young people to participate in politics and other decision-making bodies, in corporate sector companies, in nonprofits, looking at young people in their boards, in decision-making positions, looking at young people not only as interns and trainees and junior professionals, but also as directors, vice presidents, those who can take core decisions that impact the company and the nonprofit, and really sharing that power that was accumulated for so long, as John said, in older males, into really younger people and younger generations who bring their unique values, who bring their unique experience, expertise, innovation, creativity, and a new way of doing things. I completely agree with John that mentoring...
That's excellent advice. Oh. Please go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say I completely agree with John that mentorship is often seen as older people mentoring younger people. But in my life, actually, the most important mentorship experiences I have had as a millennial is from my Gen Z friends and cousins and relatives, because they bring so many different perspectives, so many different ways and challenges really for my work. And I really like engaging with the generation after me to also get their input, their ideas, and kind of put them in my shoes and see how they would solve some of these issues that I'm trying to solve from a global perspective. So I pretty much agree with mentorship bringing a 360-degree experience, top to bottom, bottom to top, but also peer-to-peer mentorship around you.
It sounds like there are so many wonderful vehicles by which people can develop their own leadership and work with others to do so as well. John, any final word from you about peer empowerment, knowledge sharing, or mentorship?
Those things are all incredibly important, and we all have an obligation to open doors. I call it WHO luck, WHO luck. And I would never have had any of the opportunities I've had if someone didn't say, I think you should go and do this, and I'll help you get in here. That's the obligation of these senior people that we're talking about. And if you've experienced that, and most of you have already experienced that, someone has opened the door to you to be part of this organization, to be part of this discussion. The important thing for all of us to do is to have the humility to remember those men and women and then emulate them. And in some cases, it's someone that's just 2 years older than you. I can remember the first time I was in a room, I was with important admirals at a table, and they're making a decision. And they brought in young leaders. If you believe it, I was only 24 or 25 at that time. I had hair in my head. And the admiral was a great representative, because after the presentation was made, he said, okay, I want to hear from everybody. And I nearly fell out of my seat when he turned to me and pointed and said, John, what do you think? before he talked to any of the senior people at the table, he asked everybody around the outside of the table that were there to learn what they thought. That's what we need to do more of. We need to share that podium. All of us have to have a sense of humility. If you don't have that sense, you're going to make a mistake. We call it derailing, because you stop listening to people. You stop caring about the men and women that are going to be your successors, and you stop developing them. So it's incredibly important for us all. Leadership is all about using your influence for a worthwhile cause. I can't think of any more worthwhile cause than helping to develop that future generations of men and women that we need now, not in 10 years. We need you now. I could talk longer, but that's enough.
Well, thank you both so much. You are both inspirations for youth and have given us such valuable perspectives during this panel session today. Now, before we move to taking questions from our audience, I'd like to ask both of you for a final key message, piece of advice, or call to action for all the young people in our audience. So John, let's start with you. What would you say?
Okay, so I have a quote that's up on my wall, and I'll read it to you all because I brought it down here. And it says, leadership is everybody's business. The next time you say to yourself, why don't they do something about this? Look in the mirror. Ask the person you see, why don't you do something about this? That's what we all need to do. We need to get in the fray, figure a way, and ask for help. But it's everybody's business to make this world better, safer, cleaner, and more equitable. And it starts with all of us, from the oldest person here in the room to all of you. And it's this idea of ownership. You know, you're going to figure out a way. You're going to work with your peers, work with your mentors, work with your coaches to get in the fray. And that's what you're all doing. That's why you're at this conference. So as an old admiral, I salute all of you.
Thanks for that. Jayathma, what would you add?
Thank you, Lauren. I would like all of us to sort of reflect a little bit about our own selves. The fact that we are in this meeting, we are having this conversation, we have internet, we have a phone or a tab or a computer to join this conversation means that we are privileged, that we have this access, we have this information, we know these people that can help us have this conversation, help us move the needle on some of the issues that we are talking about. But there's so many young people who do not have the same privilege like we do. There's 408 million young people today who live in refugee camps, in IDP camps, who do not have any access to education, employment, or internet. They live in conflict-affected areas. 350 million children and young people who are out of education. 75 million young people who are unemployed and do not have a job, do not have a livelihood. So I would like all of us to use our privilege, our voice, and our access to these platforms to speak on their behalf and to bring light to the challenges and issues that those young people in the most marginalized, most vulnerable areas and communities of the world are facing. So let's make sure that we stand in solidarity with those young people who cannot be here today and make sure that we use our voices to advocate on their behalf.
Excellent call to action and something to all of us to take to heart. We have time for one question. So this is from our audience. What do you suggest to young people about the best way for them to convey their initiative and voice to the older generation so that they can achieve the same vision for the future? John, I'll have you make comments on this first, if you don't mind.
I think my colleague will have a better answer, but I would just say, show that you are interested, show that you are passionate about influencing the way that we all are going to live in the future. And just take ownership. Look for somebody that you can talk to, a mentor, a peer mentor, a coach, anyone that can give you advice. We have a saying at the Center for Leadership that feedback is a gift. Feedback is a gift, whether it's positive or negative. It gives us a perspective on how we're viewed, So one of the ways that we can all help ourselves and go on this journey is constantly be asking for feedback, not from some boss, but from your peers and others that you respect and admire. What can I do to better myself? What can I do to be more involved? And then take action, like I said a couple of minutes ago. It's something that we all need to do. We all have, we need to have a sense of ownership to talk about the tremendous challenges that Ithra just talked about. We have to take those things on. And you, young men and women, are the answer to that. But it also requires chronologically advantaged men and women like me to help give you the capacity and the capability to do that.
Excellent. Going back to the concept of that intergenerational co-leadership that Ithra mentioned before. Ithra, final comment from you?
Yeah, I think it's very important to be constructive. I see a lot of almost conflict with different generations where we are trying to pass the blame. You know, your generation did that and your generation did this. And I think that type of conversation doesn't help anyone. At the end of the day, we need everyone to work together. We need all of us to believe in the same end goal of a better world, of a better future for us and for future generations. In order for that to happen, I think our conversations need to be civil, and our conversations need to be constructive. Of course, you could have criticism, but it's always important to give that criticism in a constructive way. So sometimes that's why I struggle with this problem of cancel culture, where as a generation, we as young people try to just cancel people, like either it is older generation or celebrities or whoever that doesn't really subscribe to our set of values. But I think, of course, you need to call out hypocrisy, but still, I think there are ways that you can do it constructively. So at the end of the day, we don't polarize the world, which is already unfortunately being polarized by our political leaders, but rather we bring everyone together, finding those common values, finding those common pieces that really make us all human.
Really excellent. And thank you to both of you for all of your comments. I think we've done a great deal to address the mismatches in leadership for youth. And I wish everyone a wonderful conference. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having us, Lauren.
Thank you.
And thank you so much to Lauren Power as well. We know that when youth are empowered, they can provide unique experiences, knowledge, and ideas to inform conversation. We also know through the pandemic, global inequalities and education challenges are barriers to this empowerment. So what examples can we find where it has worked? What can we learn from the women's movement? To take us through this session on getting beyond words, succeeding with youth empowerment, please now welcome the Y20 delegate from Saudi Arabia, Noura Al-Rubaik.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, from wherever from the world you're joining us. We are very excited to have you with us today and welcome you to our panel discussion where we literally get beyond the words. Without further ado, please allow me to introduce the amazing set of panelists we have with us today who would bring into the table their fresh perspectives, ideas on youth empowerment. Allow me to start with Dr. Bambang Sunsonatono, is the Vice President for Knowledge Management and Sustainable Development from the Asian Development Bank, ADB. We also have with us Jürgen Rittring, the Acting President of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. We also have Selman Rashid, the Y20 Sherpa for this year in Saudi Arabia's presidency. And last but not least, Rimor Motoro, the Y20 head delegate from Japan. Welcome all.
Thank you.
To start today's discussion, youth empowerment topic has always been discussed over and over the years, and it's always proved to be one of the most important and pressing topics, especially with the current circumstances that we live in today. A lot of people would always think, what does youth empowerment really entail? And if I may ask to the conversation, Mr. Jürgen, to share with us your thoughts on what does youth empowerment really entail and what does successful pathways look like in light of the current circumstances and your previous experiences. Please, Mr. Jorgen.
Yes, thank you very much. And also good morning, good afternoon, or good evening from the kitchen table here in London. We're all working from home, like probably many of you. Thank you for the invite, and it's an honor to be among three very young and charismatic women. Sorry, Dr. Bambang, you're not among that, but I guess that means because we're here, we're still young at heart. But jokes aside, I've always been passionate about youth empowerment, and I've been mentoring and sponsoring young staff throughout my career, and actually been a champion of what we call our own young professional network of staff below 35 that help to develop their skills, support career development, and also, and I know these are big words, but foster innovation at the bank. And by the way, I believe we have over 1,000 staff, so almost a third of EBRD's workforce, which are below 35 years of age. And of course, I can tell you all about how successful our international professional program is. That's a 2-year rotational training program, or our banking foundations program, which provides extra trainings to junior bankers. But to be honest, I rather use my probably now only 1 more minute, tell you about the things that I have heard directly from our young professionals. And of course, young people want to be paid, and they want to be paid well, but there's much more to it. And these are not exclusive points, but I think the organization needs to have a purpose. And I came from the private sector. I worked for a private sector bank, what we sometimes call the dark side of banking. And it's great now to work for an organization which combines banking with doing well, having an impact. I also believe in organizations which have the right culture. When I worked at ABN AMRO was taken over by RBS. I didn't feel that RBS had the right culture, the right people, not something I could associate with. And this was before the Lehman crisis, by the way. So I took the very painful decision to leave, even if it cost me a lot of money. I also believe in a good work-life balance. And last but not least, I think what young people want and looking for is a career perspective. So one of the things we are currently doing is and how to help young people to progress is actually to make sure that there's more mobility at the top. And then let me add one final thought. An organization is actually, I mean, I mentioned many things, but the organization is not responsible for your career, you yourself are. So go out there, take risks, go abroad, be passionate of what you're doing, and I'm sure with a little bit of luck, you get where Dr. Bambang or I am. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jorgen, for the interesting remarks. And if I may invite our colleague in the debate here, Mormto, on the discussion to reflect on the points you mentioned, especially the point about your findings on how youth really need to have a fresh perspective on their careers. So please share with us your thoughts on that and how you, as a young future leader, see the challenges or the experiences that youth are seeing in their careers specifically.
Thank you so much for inviting me on this panel. And Mr. Jorgen, thank you so much for your fantastic opening and your thoughts. So I'd like to introduce my personal experience as I'd like to believe a future leader, and my thoughts on the good opportunities out there and potential challenges for youth. So personally, I was also working in banking. I'm currently pursuing an MBA as a student, but my career path has been in banking. I joined a large financial group. I was in the global leadership program, and I rotated, first of all, in their headquarters, learning about decision-making and strategy, and then moved to London, where I learned about how business is done on the ground. And currently, I am pursuing an MBA, learning about businesses from an academic standpoint and about leadership. So I think that I really resonate with what Mr. Jürgen said on youth empowerment is really not only about people elevating youth, but it's about youth themselves trying to become future leaders. And on this front, I've been very fortunate with the opportunities I've had with my rotation program, where I've been able to experience a vast range of businesses in order to equip myself to become a future leader. And simultaneously, especially when I was in London, my colleagues and mentors encouraged me to take the risk and to challenge myself to pursue an MBA degree, which I am doing right now. So I think there are a lot of opportunities out there for youth right now, which is very encouraging. And these inclusion programs that EBRD has and other institutions have are an amazing opportunity for youth. On the other hand, and this is not very specific to my experience, but I do believe that there are challenges for youth, even for those who aspire to be leaders. And that is, in my mind, the culture that is taking the approach of more of an experience-based selection rather than a potential-based selection. And what I mean by that is I believe that in large corporates or institutions, there are instances where you select high position or leadership positions, and there are instances where experience is more heavily regarded rather than potential, and it makes youth more difficult to take leadership roles. Also, I've heard from my colleagues or friends who pursue more of an entrepreneurial path that even though later on it turned out that their ideas were a great business idea, when they were doing fundraising, it was very difficult for them because investors would look more into their experience rather than their potential ideas. So I believe there's a lot of opportunity out there, but at the same time, there are challenges that we should be actively addressing.
Ree, thank you so much for raising these challenges and especially reflecting on your own experience. And I think I personally also, as a representative of youth as well, fully in line with the points that you have mentioned, and is eager as well to hear Dr. Bambangs and Dr. Jürgen, Selma, and our panelists here today. What are their thoughts on the challenges, constraints that the youth are facing within their career? And if I may invite to the table Dr. Bambang to reflect on Ree's experience, but also share with us your thoughts and the learnings you have had from the various initiatives that happened in ADB, especially the Youth for Asia one. And I think myself included, and I'm sure the extended audience are very keen to hear your thoughts on that, Dr. Bambang.
Thank you, Nora, and a very good day to all of you in all over the world. I'm glad and an honor to join this important forum. So let me put the context first of Asia and the Pacific. 54% of the global populations aged under 30 reside in ADB member countries, and 25% of the total populations among our ADB member countries is aged 15 to 29. So this amount to over 1 billion individuals that live in Asia Pacific that is young. So it is clear that youth play a crucial role in the development process of a country, but this can only happen if they are allowed to become productive and also active members of our society. Even before the crisis, young people in Asia and Pacific were up to 3 times more likely to be unemployed than adults. That's a finding from our studies. And Southeast Asia and the Pacific has the world's highest youth to adult unemployment rate ratio. So when COVID-19 hits, young people employment prospects in Asia and the Pacific are severely challenged. The youth unemployment, for example, has increased 2 to 3 times in many countries, and closing of schools and training facilities is severely affecting young people. So what does ADB do in this case? We have a program, and thanks to Nora for mentioning this Youth for Asia, we call it YFA programs or initiative. This program allows our region's young people to communicate across generations and to actively contribute not only to our in-country projects, but also in the policy dialogues and knowledge work. The YFA is currently working on projects, for example, Nepal, Mongolia, People Republic China, and also empowering hundreds of local young people on the projects. The YFA works on projects for sustainable agriculture practices, COVID-19 youth impact surveys, the 3R, the reduce, reuse, and recycle, river pollution cleans up, youth-led startups in hard-hit tourism sector, and youth economic empowerment in skills and quality jobs project. So ADB YFA experience shows that when young people are given the opportunities, tools, and also respect to act as a co-leaders of change, they become more motivated to contribute effectively to the development process. And we continue working with the YFA and also another program against common constraints that inhibit young people from contributing to development. So let me mention three. First one is their skill do not match with the job available in the market. There is a job skill mismatch. Second one is the ecosystem. It's not conducive for them to do business, to become entrepreneur, startup, for example, and they don't have access to resources or not trusted to be development partner. If I may, I would like to just touch a little bit brief on one of the projects in Hanoi, for example. We find young people to be passionate about livable cities. And this is ADB $290 million project in Hanoi Metro Line 3 projects. It included the YFA team mobilizing and training almost 2,000 local youth from 10 organizations to support the safety auditing of the area surrounding Metro Line stations. So for them, in addition to learning about the transport system, they also participating in youth gain insights into best gender practices and gaining awareness of some of the problems women face in difficult cities. One youth that involved noted that this project allowed her to understand more complex gender issues in a fun and accessible manner. And the youth auditor are now better able to include gender-friendly design in the future development project. So this is example of the YFA projects, and I'm going to stop here. But perhaps I would like also to raise some questions that people really empowering, or how will the strength and characteristic of today's youth open up to more opportunities for youth self-empowerment? So I think this is a very important to all of us. Over to you, Nora.
Very interesting question, Dr. Bambang. And I would like to hear Mrs. Selma's point on that. What are the constraints that we're facing, and especially when it comes to inclusivity? We know that the concept of inclusivity is really important for youth and for women especially, and I believe there is a lot of things for us to learn from, especially from the women's quest for empowerment. Super keen to hear your thoughts on that, Selma.
Thank you very much, Noura, and it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you to the Youth 20 for the invitation to be part of this really interesting panel discussion. And I'd like to just add to what has been mentioned, because there has been, really interesting points raised, whether it's the cultural barriers, the mindsets within organizations or within youth. And just a little bit about what the Women 20 focuses on. One of the things that Women 20, we focus on policies. What kind of policies do we need to have in place to empower women and girls? And one of the things that we're calling for this year is the inclusive decision making. We need to ensure that in every point of the decision-making process, that there is representation of women. And I'd like to just add to what has been discussed by my colleagues earlier, that to add that gender layer. So when we talk about about youth issues, when we talk about young women's issues, it adds another layer of complexity. So for example, when we talk about the percentage and number of people, young people not in employment, education, or training, there's a huge, this is a big portion of the population, and mainly these are youth, but 60 or over 60% of those who are not in employment, education, or training are young women. So the question is, what are the barriers and the challenges why are they not in employment, education, or training? Again, when we look at the COVID-19 pandemic and how this is also disrupting our lives all over the world, we also see that it is a gendered pandemic. So that adds another layer of complexity. One thing that we worry about in the Women 20 and when we discuss these issues is the number of women and young women who are in charge of caring responsibilities. What are we doing about that and the whole care economy? How do we ensure that young women, young mothers go back to school, girls go back to school, they're able to work, because we're seeing now that a big majority of women are leaving the workforce and not coming back because of the pandemic and because of their typical gendered roles, caring roles primarily. When we talk about the women's empowerment movement, obviously it is a very long movement that's been ongoing and went through different phases historically over many years, but there's a lot to learn from that. And I think that the most important one is how can we ensure equal representation and inclusive decision making. And this goes for young women as well, and youth in general, men and women, young in all their diversity. How can we ensure that they are represented at the table of decision making?
That's really brilliant, really, really brilliant, Selma. And if I may, please, Dr. Jorgen, floor is yours. Let us know.
Yeah, by the way, it's not Dr. Jorgen or Mr. Jorgen. That really makes me even older. So just Jorgen, please. There's one thing I would like to add, and what we can learn from the women's quest of empowerment. And it is actually the business case for promoting inclusion. Of course, we need to provide the right regulatory framework and environment to enable women's participation in the labor market, but companies and governments alike that benefit from encouraging women's presence there, and companies with a more diverse workforce actually achieve better results. Countries enabling women's employment achieve higher GDP. So when we tackle inequalities, we do not merely help certain socio-economic groups, we actually help all of us live in a more successful and at the same time probably equal world. And lastly, I truly believe in leading by example. And this panel will be one of the last public appearances for me as as acting president of the EBRD. And last week we had our AGM, our annual general meeting, and we have selected, our shareholders have selected the first female president. And the fact that I actually even have to mention it, that's not a good thing. But you probably also have seen that Citibank has announced that for the first time in history, a US mega bank will be led by a woman. So I think it really shows that companies and governments are waking up. Thank you. And I think we lost Noura.
Nora?
Yes, but maybe I will add to your point. I think definitely building the economic case has been really a strong case to build. So when it makes business sense, when it makes total economic sense, businesses do better when they are more diverse, whether it's on gender diversity, age diversity, experiences. And I like, Ray, your point on the experience versus potential. And I actually wrote that down. And I think that's also important and reflects the challenges that many young people face when they're trying to pursue their careers. And how do we, what do we value, their experience or their potential? And that requires a lot from the employer's side to really understand and be able to evaluate their employees and support them.
Ray, would you, I mean, I'm not trying to become a moderator here, but we have to fill it, no? Ray, yes. would you say a few words on that?
Yes, I'd like to comment on what has been said, and thank you so much for the wonderful comments. I think that as a member of youth and also being a woman, for minority groups, it's as I said, there are, I think it's two ways. One is the surrounding environment of the culture. And as I mentioned, experience-based versus potential-based, for example. And then there's also the lack of confidence that actually comes from the minority groups themselves, because when you're surrounded by people who are unlike you, you always question yourself as a woman, as youth, am I experienced enough? Am I actually qualified for this position? So I think that the inclusion programs that has been mentioned by Mr. Jürgen and Dr. Bambang are fascinating in the sense that you lead by example and you're gradually changing the culture to convince all of the people that these minority groups are very effective in the work environment, but also you're adding so much more confidence to these groups that as youth or as a member of women, you can also make a great impact.
It is indeed striking, also in my experience, that there are very few women who have self-doubt if they can do it or cannot, or very few men, I would say. And many women, indeed, like you say, I mean, they don't know. There are very few women who say, I want more salary, while the men, you know, they're very much out there. But happy that we have our moderator back.
Apologies, just had some technical issue, and I think it's something unfortunately you cannot prevent in such a digital world. But actually, in the sake of inclusivity, and since we had a very interesting discussion about inclusivity, I'm very glad and pleased that this session is actually a true example of inclusivity. We have an amazing questions coming from the audience who are attending the summit today. So if I may please just throw in one question, a very interesting one that came, which was mainly about how can we unleash the potential of youth and help them, and how do we improve their education and provide them with the greater opportunities for training and entering the labor market with global partnerships. Please, Ree, if there is any thoughts you can reflect on this, especially that this is coming from youth to the youth, let us know your thoughts.
Yes, thank you so much. So I think I've talked a lot about changing the culture and implementing inclusion programs to lead by example, but also to add on this, I'd like to mention the power of affinity groups or network. So for example, during my time at business school, I've been reaching out as much as possible to the younger generation who are yet to think about what they want to do in the future and to introduce the opportunity of working in business. And as when I was in high school or when I was in college, I didn't have that much opportunity to network with sort of older generations. And I think it's an incredible opportunity to sort of get to know what's out there, because I think as much as inclusion programs are very meaningful, actually one of the barriers is younger people don't know about these opportunities. And I think it's super important that these opportunities are made known to a wider population. And interestingly, the COVID world has made the world so digital, and we can do all of these summits and all of these webinars to reach as many people as we like. And I think that's really powerful.
Thank you so much, Ree. And if I may echo what you have said, and to reflect also on the amazing outcomes that came from the youth, especially this year under the umbrella of the Y20, within the severe circumstances that we're living with this pandemic. Thank you so much, Ree. Mr. Jürgen, or Jürgen, if I may say, Dr. Bambang and Selma, if I may please invite you all for some final remarks as a closure for this interesting session. Please, Jürgen, floor is yours.
You know, I think many things have been said, but I would like to comment on Ray, actually on the COVID comment, because contrary to what many of us think, the virus doesn't affect us all equal. And it's not between rich and poor. I mean, the poor actually are getting poorer. It's not men and women. Actually, it does affect women with families more in principle, but also old and young. I've seen when I have discussions with our young employees, they find it extremely difficult, and not only from a mental well-being point of view, that they cannot party anymore, but even simple things like Dr. Bambang. I'm sure he lives in a nice house with a nice garden, etc. Some of these young people who just started in London, they live in a little flat, and sometimes it's flat sharing. How do you expect them to be productive, etc.? So I think it's up to, let's say, the older generations like us to also think about these kind of things.
Thank you so much, Jürgen. This is brilliant and important. Selma, please, any closing remarks from your end?
Actually, I think a lot of interesting points were raised today, and I find it difficult to add to what has been already mentioned. I think youth hold a lot of potential. These are difficult times indeed, but we count on youth to really come up and innovate and join find solutions together. So I wish everybody really to enjoy the summit and the rest of the sessions. It's been an absolute pleasure to be with all of you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Selma. Dr. Bambang, please.
Thank you. I really enjoyed the conversation actually, and it's very rich and inspiring also. I would like to echo my colleague Jürgen and also Salma and Ray on 3 points. First point is on the lead by example. I think the generation of mine and Jürgen also has to apply that one in our day-to-day life. Second one, the gender mainstreaming. I think that is also a very good and also very important point. And the third one is the power of network that being raised by Ray. But I would like to add one more. I think that at the end of the day, after we, other people try to create a good ecosystem for the young people to really make something different. At the end of the day, it's you yourself that will set the scene. So I would like to just say that it is really better that the willingness of the youth will be on the driver's seat in every effort, in every initiative. And this is going to be also multi-stakeholder efforts. It's not only on the government, private sector, but also civil society, including the youth organization, for example, to provide the youth environment and environment conducive to them. And for us in ADB, we will continue to support initiatives like Youth for Asia to encourage more youth-led, meaningful intergenerational engagements, which also allow you, the young people, to contribute to achievement of the SDG in Asia and the Pacific. So let's work together.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure the youth that are watching us from all around the world are up to this challenge, especially with the achieving of the SDGs. Ree, please, last but not least.
Thank you so much. I'd just like to add that I'm very excited and very hopeful because I know that youth empowerment, it's the first time it's been brought up as a theme for the Y20, and we have discussed in length and put together a great policy recommendation that includes concrete measures for G20 leaders to tackle youth empowerment. So I'm very excited for what's to come ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ree. Thanks for this exciting conversation. This has been a great pleasure moderating such an inspiring session. And thank you so much again for all your efforts. This has been a great pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And thanks to Nora for an inspiring session with real action that you can take home. Really interesting to hear Jürgen speak about sponsors versus mentors. And it's interesting to remember that mentors are advisors. They may not even be within your own organization. They help their mentees shape their ambitions and their plans, but they aren't your ticket to the top. That comes from this idea of sponsorship. Sponsors take a direct interest in you advancing. They are that ticket. They advocate for their proteges. Sponsors help them get promoted and get higher wages. And that is really important for the concept that Salma is introducing there about women and people who are not in the majority of those in charge. So fascinating panel. Now, Y20 is 10 years old. When we look back, we can see the benefits of including young voices in the G20 structure. Now, as we look ahead, there's an opportunity to accelerate and amplify their contribution. Our next session is about building bridges and breaking barriers, youth and the G20. To introduce his distinguished guests, I'm very pleased to bring back Y20 Chair, Othman Al-Muammar.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the session around building bridges and youth within the G20 engagement groups. Today, I'm joined by two amazing speakers, Princess Nof bint Mohammed Al Saud, C20 Chair, Her Highness, and Dr. Ithra Abeid, W20 Chair. Welcome, both of you. So we all have one thing in common, besides the fact that we survived 2020 almost, is that we're all chairs of engagement groups, and we all have youth within our main priority areas, specifically youth empowerment, as it is quite important for the three engagement groups. So one of the key themes for today is, of course, youth empowerment. We've included it in a lot of our policies. We've had a lot of discussions in our joint statements and so on. And I'll leave that more to the second part of today's session. But for now, I'd really love to hear from both of you on the role of youth. First around, what is your engagement group? A little bit about that. And then more around the role of youth within the engagement group, specifically in policies.
أميرة نوف ابدأي.
لا تفضلي دكتورة sorry.
Doctor, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Othman, for the introduction. And maybe you may notice that we are three generations right here. So it's interesting how already the generations are bringing us together around supporting youth in one way or another. W20 is one of the engagement group. It's made up civil society organizations, research centers, and so on, women organizations, especially in areas of entrepreneurship, rights, etc. And we have come with already reached a consensus on a set of recommendations. And I think, and this is where youth, the whole area of youth is important. To us, the key to all inclusion in finance, inclusion in labor, inclusion, digital inclusion, and so on, were two words. Inclusion in decision-making is one key, because without the presence of women, young people, and of course, various NGOs in decision-making, the decision that is made is truncated. It does not reflect the society. And therefore, for us, inclusion in decision-making is a key. The second word is accountability. And we included for the first time a whole pillar as the background for W20 recommendations, accountability and monitoring the implementation of recommendations that will be adopted by the G20 Summit. I will stop here.
Well, and as for C20, I think you're extremely familiar with it, and also your delegates, where we started in Russia during the Russian presidency. We are a non-business, non-governmental. Our platform is open to all. In fact, this year we had over 1,800 people working in the forums with us, members of the C20. Our steering committee and our advisory committee come from 18 different countries. Not only G20 countries, we're very inclusive, we're very representative, gender balanced, and we have legacy issues that we have been working on for years, and they continue, of course, with adaptation to new situations. With regards to the role of youth, I think your presence during the summit, you had youth had maybe three panels, and there was one about children also, who are our new youth, up and coming very quickly. You were a keynote speaker.
furthermore, even more than that, your delegates were active members in forming our policy pack and in our joint statements and other statements that we have put out. So you play an extremely, extremely important role within C20.
Maybe if I can add, Othman, just a word. Usually when we talk about youth, for some reason, we always think of boys, men. And you know, there is a demand that when we talk about youth, we say girls and boys, men and young men and young women. And I think this came in our discussion in the W20 to be sure that youth is inclusive of both sexes.
Definitely. And I think within the youth segment, specifically when we're talking about youth empowerment, I know that within, for example, the C20, the session was on global citizenship. And within the W20, there's a focus on decision-making inclusion for women. I mean, we all, I think, as young people, specifically within the Y20, we've created two sub-themes under the youth empowerment track. One is centered around decision-making inclusion, and the other is around youth empowerment. But I would like to get your perspective from both of your engagement groups around the challenges that young people face with respect to empowerment. Dr. Ithra?
You know, the whole issue of empowerment is very much not only related to youth, it's also related to women as well, because both face constraints in being empowered to be part of decision making. And some of the discussion is around how do you, beginning with the family, how do you allow young people, children, to participate in family decisions? Because if they're not trained from early to express themselves to be part of the decision in a family context, eventually in a school, in a community, and all the way upward, then they will never get the skills. So it's very critical that the whole experience of decision making starts very early and it's carried through the life cycle of people, learning the skills and then becoming part of it.
Princess Nav?
Within C20, you know, we have 11 working groups that mirror the G20 working groups. And so within each of those working groups, youth and the perspective of youth and the future of youth plays an extremely important role. So whether we are addressing education, so with the need to empower young women also, and men within STEM and within e-learning also, this year has been, you know, has just showed very clearly the effect of this empowerment within that arena. The digital economy and digital tools are no longer a luxury, they're a tool of empowerment. And when our youth do not have access to that, it's a big failure on parts of government. It should be looked more towards rights. Within economy, we look at specifically the NEET population. And so there are demands that we ask of the G20 countries towards youth empowerment, youth employment. We ask a lot about the indicators. We ask also, we demand that we know what's happening on the 15 by 25 promise. We see that within each element, even if it's the environment, how youth are being affected. So you have migration, climate migrants. Well, among these migrants, most of them are youth. So what are we doing for them? This is an issue that we feel very strongly about. The unemployment rates around the world. How do we know what needs to be done if the data is not disaggregated, if they're not reporting on promises that have been made? These are different facets that we look at and that we feel that youth need to be empowered with. So even with jobs, I think I heard in the panel before you were talking about the gig economy. Mostly the gig economy is run and managed by youth. So where are they from social protection systems? self-employed, part-timers, home workers, people working from home. Where are youth within these segments? What do they need? How can we empower them? So these are things we all addressed in our different policy packs and within the communique.
If I can add, Adnan, just one word. I think there is a special impact of COVID-19 also on youth, especially on girls, with the closing of schools in many communities of countries where in the world, girls, the research shows that girls are either going into unpaid work with their families or going to paid work, often care, taking care of somebody. And as a result, they may not even go back to school. And so the closure of the schools has impacted on girls even more than boys, simply because families divert girls to other functions, home functions, care functions, rather than having them, go back to school and follow what they have started.
I think within the Y20, when we're looking at the challenges, one of the main things that we've seen is that there is a huge divide between developed countries and then developing countries, specifically around youth development and education and employment. And similar to what both of you mentioned, I think the impact of COVID-19 has only exacerbated those issues even more. And so have put the young people who are already to begin with at risk, at even more risk, and that's causing a lot of frustration. And so for us, one of the main ways that we wanted to create a solution to that is through, of course, advocacy. And that's where I want to take the conversation moving forward in the session is around the importance of engagement groups within the G20 sphere. I think each of our constituencies feel the need to create a voice or to share their voice with the G20. I would love to hear from you. I know that we've collaborated quite a bit throughout the year. Maybe some of the highlights around where you've seen the engagement groups collaborating reach a new high, and maybe some pleasurable moments from those that you could share. Princess?
I think I talked about the summit. I think that was maybe the highlight is seeing your delegates on the screen discussing forcefully with great confidence their points of view and what they're advocating for. And in fact, yes, truly believe that, I mean, you are a power for change. And I'm very happy about what you addressed between the vulnerable groups and the non-vulnerable groups. This is something I think at the C20, I think we all feel that is extremely, extremely important. Within most G20 countries, I mean, young people are fighting to, let's say, break the glass ceiling, walk through the door, all of those expressions we use. But within G20, I think our biggest role is to fight for those that don't even have a door to walk through. There's no roof, there's no door, there's no building. And from our experience at the C20 and the engagement from non-G20 countries, from the global south, from the most vulnerable nations, from the least developed, they've seen this now as a platform where they can be heard, without proxy. And we highlighted how they do have the expertise and the knowledge to do so. And I think it's incumbent upon you in your working group to keep that momentum going. And as you said, recognize the difference between an empowered society, whether they have some segments that are not empowered, and within a society that has nothing. Almost. I mean, we talked, there was a session, a heartbreaking session with children at the summit, and the children, they were children in the workforce. And one of the lovely young girls was talking that she missed out on school this year. And, we're here talking about we don't have this and we don't have that and we don't have internet and we don't have... And she was saying, I missed out because we don't have a radio. So, you know, we have a long way to go in supporting the people that need most support, and where we have the luxury to support them. It is incumbent, it is our moral role to help them. So we need to understand the differences.
Maybe to build on Her Royal Highness, this last point in particular, the whole idea of those who are excluded. And for example, she mentioned that we're talking about internet and she doesn't have a radio. And so one of our recommendation was exactly on that, that the government should expand the access to connectivity as far possible into disadvantaged areas where people are basically have no connections. But that goes with it also, like now, even in some of the advanced countries as well, there are problems of connectivity, and those who are suffering are those children and young women and men who have to have online education. How are they going to have online education if they have no access not only to connectivity, but to even to laptops or you know, the equipment that is necessary? And I think this is one of the issues that humanizes the agenda of G20, is to look at the various age groups and the various excluded. And of course, the motto, we shouldn't leave anybody behind, is a big motto. But in terms of your question, in terms what was some of the positives, I think from our experience, one of the positive aspects, which is the joint advocacy. When we got together to do joint statements and how we integrated our agendas together in the joint statement so that we reinforce each other. When we talk about rights and inclusion, we're talking about everybody in the rights and inclusion. And I think this is one of the strengths of working together. And, you know, we've had, I think that the G20 engagement groups had a long history of issuing joint statements together. And I was reminded, you're talking about what was historical one, for example. It's not from this year, it's from 2018, where B20, business, C20, and W20 came together and they issued something on anti-corruption that eventually made the link between gender and anti-corruption, etc. But I think the rewarding part for us was when we got together to say, where do we fit with each other? Where do women, youth, labor, NGOs, etc., and how we can issue a joint statement in order for the G20 summit leaders to see the issues as comprehensive rather than as fragmented.
Exactly, it's about amplifying the voices, and about there's always areas of alignment, and we should always look to where we align and never to where we differ, and work strongly to advocate for those lines.
I think for me, just to echo what you both said, the highlight of working together was during the Sherpa meeting, the third Sherpa meeting in September, where yes, that was amazing. It was basically an announcement, really, an ode to all of our constituencies that we were there to get their voices across to leaders. Of course, we couldn't do it in person, but the message was delivered. And I think for us, in terms of our role as engagement groups moving forward, there's always, at least for the Y20 this year, it's been the 10th year anniversary. We're hoping for another great 10. But there is still a lot more that we can do to represent the constituencies that we have. And I know we're quite short on time, but I would like to leave it for your closing messages. So I'll start with Dr. Ithra, please.
I think my closing message is that both the three engagement groups, Y, C, and W, are central, because the three objectives of the G20 presidency is inclusion. And so the voices of women and youth would naturally, they were emphasized in the objectives of the G20 presidency. So our roles were already supported from the initial stage. Having an active society, inclusive society, means the engagement group of C will find its place. So I think this is what I felt was the strength of the G20 this year, is that it had already identified the commitments towards civil society, youth, and women as empowering and to be empowered. So I think this is, for me, was very special.
Princess?
I think my last message is first, I think we should all do our homework and read each other's policy packs and communiques. The last message is that regarding your communique, I mean, your communique is the tool and that you will be engaging with the world. So it has to be bold, it has to be implementable, and you have to be very vocal about it. And you have to, it's your tool that you will advocate for. Advocacy now, you know, this is, with all the work, this is the glamour. Advocacy is grunt work. Advocacy is not glamorous. It is tiring. Sometimes you feel that it's thankless, but it isn't. It makes a huge difference. We're all going to go home and we're going to take our chair hats off and Sherpa hats off for this year. But I urge each one of you within your country, because what you do within your country affects what gets to the Leaders Summit. So you have to be Sherpas within your countries throughout the year and identify, create a power map, identify who to talk to and advocate from November 24th. It doesn't stop with your communicating with all the power you have from here until you start, Italy starts and beyond.
And I think that's a beautiful, yes, I think that's a beautiful way to end it. I was going to say I will continue the advocacy by encouraging all of our listeners and who are here to attend to read the C20 communique and to be ready for the W20 communique coming up right after our summit, inshallah. Thank you, both of you, for honestly, for throughout the whole year. I learned a lot from all of you, and from the advocacy work that we've done has been some of the most amazing highlights that I've had during this presidency. Shukran.
Shukran. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Othman, as well. Now, part of being empowered means understanding the wider world and your part in it. And this is not an issue just for heads of state. It's a critical issue for anyone, whether working in an NGO or a business. We've now reached the final session of our first day, and it's called Empowered Youth, Tomorrow's Leaders. In this final session, you'll be hearing from leadership lessons from someone who's walked from the private to the public world. Jose Manuel Barroso. He is in conversation with Sebastian Wehrman, the Y20 head delegate from Canada. Sebastian, welcome.
Thank you very much, Tina. Hello and bonjour. My name is Sebastian, and I am the Canadian head delegate for the Y20 this year. I'm joining from Montreal, also known as Tiohtià:ke, traditional land of the Connecticut. And it's my pleasure to welcome Jose Manuel Barroso, former Prime Minister of Portugal, former EU Commissioner for close to a decade, and the current chairman of Goldman Sachs International. Prime Minister Barroso, welcome to the Y20 Summit, and thank you for closing out our first day.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I'm delighted to participate in this event.
Empowered Youth, Tomorrow's Leaders is the subject of our conversation. And I wanted to begin by exploring what your thoughts might be on leadership of young people across the world. What are some leadership lessons that you've learned from your career, which has spanned across the public and private sectors, and as we all know, across several countries?
So first of all, let me say how delighted I am to participate in this event, an event that takes place in the G20 framework. Unfortunately, I cannot be physically in Saudi Arabia, but I wish all the best for this G20 and for this particular event. In fact, if I may be a little bit personal, the G20 at level of heads of state and government started following an initiative of the European Union. When I was president of the European Commission, it was in 2008, I went together with the rotating president of the Council of the European Union, the president of France, Nicolas Sarkozy. We went to see President George W. Bush in Camp David, telling him that the G8 was not sufficient to face this crisis, the biggest financial crisis, and we need more countries, at least 20. And then we had the first G20 at level of heads of state and government in Washington, end of 2008. The second was here in London. I'm speaking to you from London. And then the third already with President Obama in Pittsburgh. And now the G20 became undoubtedly the primary economic forum, but it's extending beyond this economic framework. Now about, and I'm telling you because this is about the question that you are asking me, what is the most important lesson is to be inclusive, to try to put people together. I had a very atypical career because I was from academia to politics, and again to academia, then again to politics, and afterwards I joined Goldman Sachs as chairman of Goldman Sachs International, so corporate governance. And now I just was nominated head chairman of Gavi, it's the Global Alliance for Vaccines. I will assume this job, this position. It's a pro bono, non-remunerated position in January. So leading governance of a humanitarian organization, international humanitarian organization. And so one thing I've learned in all these jobs or positions was the need to go beyond ideological differences, regime differences, sometimes cultural differences. And that I think is more important than ever now, because we are seeing a world with a lot of geopolitical fragmentation, polarization. And I deeply believe that more than ever, we need to face global challenges like climate change or pandemics. We need common public goods to be pursued over these differences. We are in a position where we can no longer say your side of the boat is sinking. It's not just your side. We can all sink if we don't have a common approach to those issues. I would say that is my probably fundamental lesson. There are many others, but that's the first I'd like to share with you.
Perfect. In that increasingly geopolitical and complex world that you mentioned, what opportunities are there for young leaders, young people, and what qualities do they need to have in order to deal with the increasing complexity? What would you recommend?
I think the qualities are, first of all, intellectual curiosity, openness. Speaking, for instance, several languages is important, if possible. Of course, English is now lingua franca. I think today, all over the world, we have one language that we can use, speak kind of international English, not very good, mine, but okay, but I can make myself understood. But I speak 5 languages, by the way. So I think it's very important to understand other peoples and to be able to reach necessary consensus. So intellectual curiosity, openness, if possible, a wide culture to make people able to understand change and to manage change and to deal with uncertainty. I also think it's a very important resilience. So if you ask what was my most difficult position, was not president of the European Commission or prime minister or foreign minister. It was leader of the position. I was leading the party because in that case, we have to stand, we have to be very firm, we have to be determined. And above all, but that's my personal, very personal position, I think the most important thing is to have enthusiasm for life. Life is a blessing, and every day is a blessing. And so to love what we do, one of my personal mottos is never lose your enthusiasm, even when you lose some illusions. Today, I have not the same illusions I had when I was 18 or 20 years old, but I keep the same enthusiasm for life. So that will be, I think, more my quality, what I recommend as qualities. Having said that, opportunities are there many, because the world is going through transformation. I think, at least let me speak just about two. One is decarbonization, because we need to fight climate change. It's an existential threat. But I think we should avoid the apocalyptic views. I mean, the world is not going to disappear. Future is not yet written. The future is what we make of it. Namely, if you are young, sometimes people ask me, what is going to be the future? My answer is, it depends. It depends. It depends on what you do or what you don't do. So decarbonization and all these things about environment, I think, are great opportunities for new leaders and global leaders and young leaders. Another thing is, of course, digitization. We have seen this pandemic has accelerated. There is an acceleration in a spectacular way of digitization, not only in platforms of communication like this one, but also in the financial world, in cultural matters. So we need more people able. So basically, we need two types of skills for the future, from a job point of view. We need young people to be able to do what machines cannot do, because there will be more and more artificial intelligence, more and more machine learning. So people that are able to have empathy, interpersonal skills, capacity for advocacy, that we need more, because that, at least in the foreseeable future, machines will not be able to do. But also we need people for engineering to have precisely the capacity to build and develop the systems of new systems in the, let's say, artificial world, in the virtual world, including software and so on, web, everything that is a web engineer, that's going to be very requested. And I also believe that's, of course, important negotiating skills, capacity of negotiate. So these are basically the skills and the qualities I think will be more in demand for current and future leaders.
Yeah, thank you. You speak a bit about digital engagement in the online era. I am curious what your thoughts might be on the role of leadership as a cultural integrator or a convener of various schools of thought, as you say, in science, engineering, and different skills. What brings those things together at the end of the day?
Yeah, I think it's critically important. And by the way, let me once again share my experience. I was leading the European Commission for 10 years, 2 mandates. It's the executive body of the European Union. We were, at that time, we were 28. Now, because of Brexit, it's 27. And every Wednesday, I had to lead the meeting with 28 people, and myself and 27 others from all countries of Europe. I mean, in my cabinet, in my office, I had people from 12 countries of Europe. And so, of course, that's why I mentioned before language. There was a great intellectual from Italy, Umberto Eco, who said once, the language of Europe is translation. And I think the same can be said of the world, if you believe in the need to have a community of that goes beyond the nation state and or beyond our region. I think it's perfectly possible to be patriotic, to love our country. I love my country's Portugal, but at the same time, I'm a committed European, and I consider myself a citizen of the world. There is no contradiction, I think, for this. And that's exactly what I think is important today when we engage, if you want to have open societies, open economies, and if you want to have a multilateral order that works. Because in a multilateral order, including the G20 and beyond, we are discussing matters between different political regimes. Fair enough. We cannot, I don't think it's realistic to think about the convergence of all the regimes of the world, at least not in the foreseeable future. But we have to be able to respect the other and to try to reach consensus on issues that are common public goods. So this idea of integrating different cultures is very important. Respecting, I mean, there was two great Afro-American singers, Otis Redding and Aretha Franklin, that they were singing a very interesting song. You find that in YouTube called Respect. All I need is some respect. I cannot sing. I promise I will not sing. But I will advise you to listen to that song, because I think this is very important in the current world, because we have seen differences, but we need to keep this respect. So, and a cultural integration. I mean, I don't like very much the idea of integration culture. I mean cooperation, dialogue, diversity, because it's not completely integrated, because it's the beauty of the concept, by the way, you use it also in the European Union, is unity in diversity. So the respect for diversity and the unity comes from that, but not one culture trying to integrate the others, you see, because that, on the contrary, I think the difference of cultures are important. This diversity is important, provided we make them as a way of enriching ourselves, and because provided we are in favor of identity. In French, we say identité sans être identitaire. So to be in favor of identity, but not making that an obsession, to be open identities, open identities. So at the end of the day, I would say the fundamental concept is openness, openness to different cultures, openness to diversity.
Perfect. Well, I believe we'll leave it at that, but thank you very much, Prime Minister Barroso. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you today, and I hand it back to Tina.
Thank you. All the best.
Thank you so much, Sebastian, for that fascinating interview there. Well, this has been an amazing day one of the Y20 2020 Summit. It's the premier international youth conference, and you can see absolutely why. We've had some incredible speakers today from across the world sharing their experience and giving us real ideas to take home and use. I will be back with you not tomorrow, but the day after that, and I'll be very much looking forward to speaking with you then about the ways to be and become and continue to be an important global citizen. Tomorrow will be a focus on the future of work, and especially on entrepreneurship in this day and age where the gig economy is not only important, but critical to understand. We'll be taking a look at that tomorrow. So my name is Ithra. I've been delighted to be with you. I will leave you now, and I will look forward to joining you in just a couple of days.